let's talk about instants and like instant speed reactions and interacting on other players' turns than your own, because I think that Grit has no place for this. I've played a lot of games, and I've felt what that's like. I've also watched a lot of tournament play. I've watched a lot of games being played by other people, and I think that I don't want Grit to have a permissive system, or I don't know what it's called, but I'm going to call it that, right? A permissive system where when you do something on your turn, you're waiting for permission from the other player or other players to allow you to do that. I want it to be more of a check-in system where you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and they say, "Okay, I understand what you're doing, but I'm not disallowing you from doing that." And if you're aware, I guess all of these videos are like, you have to be aware of something to be able to like listen to this maybe, but Grid doesn't have instants. It doesn't have quick action and actions. It doesn't have like interrupts. It doesn't have anything of that nature where you are playing something from your hand on another player's turn in response to something. The only time that happens is for defense cards, but that's their only purpose. Their only purpose is to say, hey, when you're getting attacked, you can play this card. But there's nothing else like that in the game. And that's by design. It used to be like that. We used to have that in a bunch of iterations, but I took it out because I realized I didn't want, I just, something in me was really done with the fact that I need to say something and then wait for you to allow that to happen, and because that really gummed up the gameplay. And there are some games where that really works. I think that it's a good in like Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it's good in Magic, has its own set of, that's a lot of rules. It's a lot of upkeep and figuring out when you can do things and when you can't, and priority and all that stuff. Final Fantasy TCG has this. I know there's a lot more. But that's not, I don't want that anymore, at least in Grit. I want it to feel like you're kind of comboing off, like you're doing something and you either know the reactions or like the repercussions of doing that thing, or you just do your thing, and then when it matters, your opponent can respond and do something about it. In a previous iteration of the game, you had only two different things you could do on your turn. You had a bonus action and you had an action. And the idea was that you could set something up with a bonus action and then set or attack or something with your main action, and then it would go to your opponent's turn. So every time you did something on your turn, your opponent could kind of see the plan unveiling, and they could react to that. They could alter what they were going to do. It's like, oh, I was setting it for a big attack, but now I need to set up for like a big defense or something. And then eventually it just like, you could do so much more in a turn. You could just do so much more in a turn, and I didn't want to gate that anymore behind like action bonus action system. So I think that Grit doesn't need instants or quicks or interrupts or anything like that. I think that the system works as is so that you can take your turn, and when you're looking to interact, you know what that is. So in our last gameplay video, we play tested curse cards, and curse cards are meant to be kind of like instants that you've set up. A really good example of this is Counterspell. And so if you're not aware, but in Magic the Gathering, and I think a lot of other games that you could probably think of, they have something called a counterspell, and this is when your opponent plays something, you can play something from your hand to counter it. You basically stop you cancel the effects of the card and you discard it. It does nothing. So you're essentially paying to stop your opponent and say no. And so that's a very big, prominent thing. And so I know I want that in the game, but I want it in a different way, where it's something you have to react with. And so there's an enhancement card that you play, and when you play it under your opponent's control. And it says, when you play a card, cancel that card's effects and discard it. And so it effectively functions as the same way, and it forces your opponent to play in a different way and react it differently, rather than you kind of like holding not like a trump card, but you're holding like an answer, and you're waiting for them. So it now becomes, I'm gonna play this, you have to play around it, and it's up to you how to deal with it. So now it becomes a puzzle for your opponent. So you're setting up these puzzles and these situations which you want your opponent to kind of stumble through, and that way, on the other side of their turn, they're not in as good of a position as they could have been. And I think that that's how I want it. I want it to be like you're reacting. You're figuring out a puzzle on your turn. You're trying to figure out the best use of your cards. You're trying to not give your opponent value. You're not trying to run into these things that they can do, these reactions on the board. And that's what I really want. I really want you guys to basically put something down and say, okay, I'm going to do this. it's your job to react to it and figure out how to deal with this in the best way. All ways are bad, but there's a least bad way, if that makes sense. So I know I don't want instants. I know I don't want any of that stuff, and it's just like anything that's a reaction will be on the board via character abilities or enhancement effects or weapon effects or something like that, where it's like, if something is going to happen, if something is going to happen by your opponent on your turn, you already know the outcome of that, and that's so that way you can plan for your turn better. So if I play a card and my opponent has something that says, when your opponent plays a card, it costs one more, whatever, you can plan around that and you can try to figure out what to do with that. Your opponent is still getting the value of impeding your turn, but they're not stopping you from playing your turn. I hope that makes sense, because I think there's a distinction between being like, you can't play things on your opponent's turn, but you can still react and be ready. And there's a lot of interaction already within the game, within the attack sequence, when you have to play defense cards or you have to parry, and your other reactions that you're trying to maintain throughout if you want to use defense abilities. But I think that containing a majority of the player-to-player interaction to the attack sequence is a good thing. And I think that's where I want Grit to be as far as interaction between players, because realistically, that's a lot. It's a lot. Attacking is the main way you play the game. It's like the main thing you want to do. So like, if the main way to win is also the main way to not lose, then I think that's okay. I think that's totally fine. I don't think you need a bunch of other ways to stop your opponent from doing stuff. It just has to be a matter of, is there enough interaction in the game? And this actually goes to a kind of a side. Maybe this is a different topic, but I can go into it a little bit now. One of the things that's hard for me to balance and to play test and kind of like see from a fun point of view, like if I'm looking at the game like, oh, that's fun, or oh, that's not fun, is when I'm interacting with my opponent, the main way to do that is to either like remove cards they have in play, and like 99% of the time I'm going to attack something of yours and you're going to lose that, so you can't use it anymore and you have to replay it or refine it or whatever. So really, when you're like having this conversation, it's just like punch, 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 punch. And at the very basic level, that feels scary, because it's really just like, I'm going to keep hitting you until I win. And that sounds bad. It sounds like, like not fun, if that makes sense. And I always have to go back to fighting games for this, because fighting games are just this. It's like, I'm going to hit you until I win. Once your health bar goes down, right, I win the game. And the only way to do that is by hitting you. And sometimes it feels like, how is that fun? But then I have to like come back to this thought that like, how you hit somebody is the fun part, not hitting them. Hitting them is not the fun part, but how you hit them is the fun part, right? If I'm going to take Street Fighter, I love Street Fighter. So if you don't know what Street Fighter is, I'll do my best to explain it. But it's a 1v1 fighting game where you're just like, you're just hitting each other on like a 2D screen. And if you're playing Ryu, who's like the namesake of the game, you're throwing fireballs, you're uppercutting, and you're punching, right? And that's pretty like standard, fundamental for Street Fighter. But if you have a character like Zangief, who's this big giant Russian wrestler, he wants to get really close and grab you and do a lot of damage with like a single grab, and like headbutt you. He doesn't throw fireballs or do uppercuts or any of that. So you guys are still just hitting each other, but you're doing it in a very, very different, unique way. And that's what I want Grit to be, is you're hitting each other in a very unique way. When I'm playing the guild, I'm setting up cards on the bottom of my deck and I'm getting a payoff of that to hit you really hard, as opposed to the bad guys whose archetype wants you to have a really low tenacity level total, so that way you're basically controlling how small that is, so you get to deal more damage instead. So you're kind of like devaluing your tenacity to deal damage, which is counterintuitive to the rest of the game, but it's how they win. That's how they win. So what this boils down to, the point I'm trying to make, is that I think that interacting with your opponent in multiple ways is good, even if it's just fighting, like just beating each other up. So that's what introduced the mechanic of attacking enhancements. So you're essentially like, you don't just have one target, you now have multiple targets, and you need to say, okay, is it worth me attacking for a stamina card to win the game, or is it worth me hitting this enhancement that gets the other player to draw a card every turn? And I'm like, well, that's too important, so I have to hit that. I want to invest resources and hit that. And that's my way of trying to slow my opponent down rather than just winning the game. So I want to say that that's enough. But then you look at it sometimes, especially at the gameplay videos, if you haven't watched those, I often find that it's hard to keep things on the board. And because my opponent can just attack them every time they come down, it's hard for them to gain value. It's hard for them to stay in play. And it feels like I'm trying to build up, but like it's deconstructed so fast that I don't feel like it's rewarded. Like I should probably do a test where it's like, this deck has all attack and defense cards, and this deck has attack, defense, and enhancement cards. And this deck is just going to play out a lot of enhancements whenever they get to, not when it's a silly idea, but when they can. And this one's just going to attack, just every time attack, right? And just see, like, is that even comparable? Or is the attacking deck just going to win 100,000% of the time rather than having this one that is balanced with all the other parts of the game that they don't even stand a chance? Because in that case, why would you ever play enhancements? If you can just play attacks that immediately gain value, why would you do that? I don't know. So maybe there's a different way you can like deal with enhancements. So like this interaction for your opponent isn't just I hit you, you hit me. Now it becomes like I'm gonna try and, I don't know, confuse and disorient you so you lose concentration on these enhancements you're maintaining or something. I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what to do about that, but I know that there's an answer somewhere. I just have to find it. So if you have any ideas, let me know. I think that's gonna do it for today. I started to ramble off on like a tangent that shot out this way. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, obviously, click the like button. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out. Thanks. If you made it this far, super awesome. Thank you so much. And if you didn't, you got them. You did it. You got them. But wherever you are in the world, have a great day, night, weekend, morning, whatever. And I hope to see you in the next video. So, see ya.